You're watching Mobile World Live. Today we're going to be talking with some industry leaders about roaming performance testing. Joining me, we have Florian Leeder, who is Head of Product Management at SEGRON. SEGRON, of course, is a leader in active testing solutions for digital services. Joining Florian, we have Pedro Sebastiâo, who is Comfone's Director of Hubbing Services. Comfone is a market leader providing all services for establishing roaming connections between mobile operators. And we also have Peter Jarich, a familiar face to Mobile World Live. He is, of course, Head of GSMA Intelligence. Gentlemen, good to see you.
Hello.
Hi, Justin.
Hello.
Great to be here.
Thanks for joining us, gentlemen. Let's talk about what's going on with roaming in today's landscape and roaming performance testing. Pedro, if I can come to you first, what makes managing roaming performance different from your home network?
Yes, managing the home network is quite different from managing a roaming scenario. So in a roaming scenario, there's multiple interconnections, multiple suppliers, multiple carriers involved, so it adds really a lot of complexity, not only from the technical side, but also from the commercial side, with the need to have multiple roaming agreements with each operator in each country.
Peter, I'm hearing the word complex here. Is that fair?
Yeah, complex is fair, but I think key to a lot of what Pedro called out is I think this idea of control. Right. It's obviously a lot easier to monitor, much less manage something like performance within your own network. But when you're talking about partners network, it's really a different thing, right? So roaming services are by nature a global endeavor. I mean, and as Pedro suggested, those connections are complex, particularly when you're dealing with multiple roaming agreements, some of which might have been done bilaterally, but maybe not, right? They may have been done through a hubbing agreement. So then you're sort of losing some of that control in there. And of course, you could send people out there, or you could send personnel abroad to manage all of this. But that's obviously in reality not tenable. I mean, it's not sustainable. If you're going to do this, yes, people are important, but so are innovative technologies.
So what's the customer experience here, Florian? Do they expect the same experience as on their home network?
Yeah. Justin, for sure, I would say yes. I mean, it's from the customer experience, it's not really a difference anymore. And if you travel, if I travel, I mean, I'm used to the services that I get at home, and I expect the same services when I'm abroad. So I think it's the same expectation.
Yeah, and Florian, of course, for the last few years, we haven't been traveling as much due to COVID, and we've really become accustomed to always being connected on our home network. So how important is testing to ensure quality of service when roaming?
Yeah, it's super important, I would say. I mean, you correctly mentioned now that we had a kind of period where traveling was not done so much due to COVID. Now, I think everything is ramping up. I personally go on holiday next week, so traveling abroad, and I'm always connected. I'm connected here, I'm connected elsewhere. And therefore, I think the demand for high performance roaming is high. And in that sense, also testing. The problem is just that, most customers, subscribers, they don't report back to the operators. So they don't even know that something doesn't work well. So therefore, testing is really the only methodology to identify issues and troubleshoot.
What are the risks of a poor roaming experience?
When we talk with operators about their network priorities, right, and we run a survey every year, what's important to them, two things always come out on top: revenue generation and user experience, right? They're the top strategic imperatives. And that silent roamer concept, right, that Pedro was just talking about, that touches on both of them, right? A poor user experience leads to a lost revenue opportunity, right? Those folks who may be looking for Wi-Fi and probably will have a horrible experience there. And it's a big loss, right? It's a big revenue loss for operators, as well as a huge negative impact on customer perception of quality performance. I mean, subscribers probably don't always know the actual cause of a poor roaming experience, but they're going to blame the operator they know, right? They're not going to blame, it must be the network where I'm at here, wherever I'm going, right? Wherever you're vacationing, Florian. They're going to blame their home network more often than not. And again, that doesn't help the operator's perception or that experience perception.
Thanks, Peter. So from what I'm hearing, the bottom line here is that we really need robust roaming performance and testing solutions, right, Pedro?
Yes, exactly. So mobile operators are looking more and more to focus on quality and improving customer experience, and Comfone the same. So quality is the top priority for us, and that's why we established a partnership with SEGRON, and we're using their roaming testing solutions to our key to roam customers.
Yeah, Pedro, and we are also very excited about this partnership because we can, of course, first of all, support the market leader here in the roaming business, but also learn what are the top challenges here and create the respective solutions for it. By the way, do you know what the top challenges are? I recently found a quite nice research from Kaleido Intelligence, and they find out that top challenges in roaming are currently 5G, which is not a surprise, but also VoLTE.
Well, that's interesting, Florian, because VoLTE has been around for years. So why is it now a top technical challenge?
Yeah, that's true, Justin. I mean, LTE is there for years, and data roaming is there for years, but VoLTE was not really implemented. Probably because at the beginning there was not really smartphones on the market that were VoLTE capable. And secondly, there was not a high need because you could still fall back to 2G, 3G, so it was not high priority.
Yeah, I mean, but to be fair, and we did some work on roaming last year with the radar report. Exactly, found the same thing, right? 5G, VoLTE, key things. And to be fair, on the VoLTE side of things, it's not just about 2G and 3G voice solutions being in place and effective, right? VoLTE isn't easy, right? It's not simple, right? Beyond the need to optimize things like the uplink in your own network, right? Because you now need to make sure voice as a two-way communications, that it's robust on both sides, right? VoLTE allows for things like configuration options, so operators can tune their network, optimizing things like speed and load, and those customizations are cool, right? They're nice, but they create complexity, particularly when devices move from one network to the other, and that's obviously going to complicate things like roaming, right?
Yes, exactly. Like we launched the first VoLTE roaming connection in Key2Roam already 5 years ago, and at that time we were really excited that it will be flying. But yeah, due to some technical and commercial issues as well, it was a bit stalled down. But the good news is that since the beginning of the year, we have a lot of more roaming partners connected with VoLTE, more roaming connections that we are opening. I believe that also helped the fact that AT&T in the USA switched on their 2G and 3G networks, so operators finally woke up and saw the need to establish VoLTE roaming.
Yeah, I was going to ask actually, I mean, why can't we just continue to fall back on 2G, 3G signals for voice roaming? Maybe Peter can take that.
Yeah, no, I mean, let's rewind a little, right? So we started off this conversation talking about the elevated importance of mobile data in a post-COVID world, right? So assuming then that operators are going to want to keep their 2G and 3G networks alive and kicking for years to come, I mean, that's just silly, right? We know they want to scale 4G. We know they want to roll out 5G, and doing that, yeah, it involves sunsetting some of those older networks, in part to use that spectrum, refarm that spectrum for new technologies, but also because it's just complex to run a 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G network all in tandem. And so we've got to expect the closing down of those old networks like we've seen in some markets already.
Yeah, but we need to be careful before shutting down the 2G and 3G networks, because it's needed, of course, to establish the VoLTE agreement. It's needed to perform all the testing, otherwise the roaming will not work.
Yeah, that's true. I think testing is key here as well. It's not just about implementing, you need to test as well.
There are a lot of moving parts here, gents. I mean, Peter, what about some of those complexities of VoLTE roaming adoption that we've just mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, some of those have sorted themselves out, right? So one, I think we heard earlier, VoLTE phones weren't necessarily available that much. Now they're much more widely available. That's great, right? Secondly, the industry, it's kind of aligned on some of the technical challenges and roaming implementation standards. So there used to be questions about local breakout versus S8 home routing. That's kind of been sorted out in favor of S8 home routing, in part because it doesn't require IMS in the visited network. And that simplifies things. Of course, 5G coming around really helps things because operators have this interest in sunsetting their older networks. And of course, we can't forget the good work being done by all of our colleagues at the GSMA who set out implementation guidelines. So some of the stuff is being sorted. I think that's a really, really good thing that we need to recognize for all the problems with VoLTE.
Yeah, I agree, Peter. So certainly some challenges are sorted out. But one challenge is still remaining, how to make sure that you can reliably test global roaming from an end user's perspective. So quality benchmarking, I think, is really essential to take the right steering decision. It's not just the price, right? But the challenge that I see here is really, do you know where to exactly look at? I mean, roaming is so complicated. You have home networks, you have visited networks, you have the carriers in between, the end users use different devices. So to draw really the right conclusions, I think you need to have good systems and solutions. And I believe reporting and analysis is really essential here to identify what's going wrong and help the quick troubleshooting and the collaboration between operators, roaming partners.
Yeah, can you expand a little bit on some of the challenges around reporting and troubleshooting, Florian?
Yeah, like in all telco testing, it's not enough to just say it's working or not. So success rates is not sufficient, I would say. You have to look really into more sophisticated KPIs that explain the quality aspects, like, I don't know, MOS values. I mean, if the voice call is working, but you can't hear each other, I mean, it's still not a good performance. So therefore, these KPIs are important. If you look to 5G, latency will play a big role in the future. So I think you need really good solutions, innovative solutions to basically verify the performance and in roaming, of course, also on a global level.
So how does an operator actually go about performing these tests globally? Peter, can you provide some comment?
Yeah, so we actually talked about network testing in a discussion we had with SEGRON earlier in the year. And folks, if you haven't checked it out, you really should. It was a great conversation. And how that testing generally leverages modems, right? It looks at modems to do that testing. And traditional roaming quality testing follows suits, using modems acting as what you might call robots to carry out the test suites.
Exactly. And to ship these modems worldwide for each technology, it's quite a pain. So you need to contact the hosting partners. You need to deal with customs. We all know that for some countries it's difficult to ship equipment, and it's really slowed down the pace of testing new technologies. So we're already catching up in VoLTE, but for instance, for 5G, there's not many locations available for testing. And let's not forget that 5G standalone is here. Voice over new radio will be here soon, and 6G also will be sooner than we think.
Yeah, I agree, Pedro. From my point of view, it's two aspects that are relevant. One is, of course, that I really be as close as possible to the customer's experience. And secondly is that I really cover all the radio technologies available. We have still the legacy technologies, but we are also talking about 5G in the meantime, right? And this is also the reason why we at SEGRON have decided to go for smartphones as a test probe, because it's close to the subscriber, but it provides also already all the technologies that you need. So from 2G over VoLTE until 5G. So I think that's how you should do.
Florian, how exactly does SEGRON use real smartphones for roaming testing?
Yeah, basically we have created nice boxes, and in these boxes we put the smartphones in. Those boxes are distributed across the world, basically all interconnected. We support SIM multiplexing technology, so that way we can basically virtually transfer the single SIM cards and insert them into the smartphones, and that way we can test roaming on a global level every time, every day.
Peter, do you see this strategy as being superior to modems?
Yeah, I mean, and again, to say, if folks haven't checked out the conversation before, check it out, because it basically addresses the same concept, right? The context was different, but the basic point remains, right? When you test with a device that actually replicates the user experience, you're going to get better insight into that user experience. It's common sense. I mean, we've talked a lot about technical things here, but that basic idea that a phone similar to the phone someone will have in their hands is going to give a better indication of their experience than a modem is really there. And in this case, you don't have additional equipment or interfaces required. especially for these new technologies. You just need to make sure that that phone handles that. And then that allows you, when you test with smartphones, to test anything the smartphone can do, right? So whether that's VoLTE, we've been talking about here, right? But 5G, web browsing, any of the OTT applications that we all know and love.
Yeah, I agree, Peter. So at the end, I think smartphones go a little bit beyond of what we currently do. Currently, we do quality of service. Smartphones cover this quality of experience aspect. Therefore, I think it's the future-proof solution to go with smartphones.
Guys, it's been a fascinating conversation. Thank you very much. Really appreciate your time and expertise. Thank you for joining us today. And of course, we look forward to seeing you and learning more at the WOS event, which is coming up in September in Cape Town. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank
you.
Pleasure.
Glad to be here.